Hello, everybody. Welcome to a live stream for the J Gaming Tech channel with your host, Jacob Berman. Today, I'm joined by author Blaine Pardoe, and he's the author of numerous Mech Warrior comics and BattleTech comic books. I have some of them here. These are the free ones I've got. And I'll have the links to all of them in the description below. I really enjoyed reading these books. Well, welcome to J Gaming Tech, Blaine.
Well, thanks for having me on.
Of course. What led you to become an author in the BattleTech universe?
Honestly, I was still in college at the time, and I had contacted FASA Corporation, who had the license at that point in time for BattleTech. I reached out to them to write for their Star Trek game. They had the Star Trek role-playing game at the time, which I really enjoyed. I sent them a manuscript for that, and they said, okay, we're going to publish that, but have you heard about Battle Droids, which was the original name for BattleTech at the time? I said, no, I hadn't. They sent me some material on it, as well as one of the early boxed editions of it, and I kind of fell in love with the stompy robot thing. So the next thing I knew, when they put out their first supplement for the game, which was the 3025 source book, it's a tech readout of all the mechs and tanks and stuff like that. I was one of the authors that was given the opportunity to write for that. So since 1985, I've been writing BattleTech.
What would you say is your favorite sci-fi books that you authored, if you have a favorite?
In the BattleTech series, I go between Forever Faithful and Betrayal of Ideals. I like the themes of both books. I think Betrayal of Ideals appeals to me on a lot of levels because it's about Clan Wolverine, which is kind of a unspoken myth within the Clan universe. And I had a lot of fun with that story because we had established in canon what was going on with the Clan Wolverines, with the Wolverine clan. And I decided to kind of flip that narrative a little bit. Rather than make them the bad guys, I kind of made them the victims. And it was a neat thing to do. Most of the fans really enjoyed it. It was a fun twist on what was established canon because, the victors always write the history. And so the version that the fans were used to was the version that, had been provided in the canon written by the victors. It was interesting to see the story from a completely different perspective. And I think it was a lot of fun. From a character development perspective, I've always enjoyed Forever Faithful. I think it was neat to go back to the entire, Twilight of the Clan series, pick up a character I had created, Trent, who is a traitor to the Smoke Jaguar clan, and actually kind of complete that story the right way to kind of tell more of his story. It was really fun from a character perspective to take Paul Moon, who had been an antagonist throughout all of this, and really make Paul Moon kind of become almost a heroic figure within, the survivors of the Smoke Jaguars. And I thought that was a really fun thing to do. It tied in with another book that I had done called Surrender Your Dreams, which was set in the Dark Ages. So there are a lot of elements and components that I got to pull together with that. And so those two books are probably my most favorite within the BattleTech universe.
What do you think of the Mech Warrior games if you played them? Do they remind you a lot of the comics, or do you think they're very different and divergent from the comics?
I have not played what I would call the PC-based games or the console-based games that much. I think they're very close to what we have established as canon in the universe. I did for a long time play Mech Warrior Online. I stopped that in March. I've enjoyed playing Mech Warrior Online because it does put you in the cockpit and give you that feel for it. I think the computer games have done well in capturing some of those essence. I'd say the only ones that didn't were the real early ones like Crescent Hawk's Inception and the Sega Genesis version of BattleTech that they put out. Those early things didn't quite capture what was going on with BattleTech. They applied some mechanics that they weren't true to the universe, etc. But that was to be expected. I mean, we're talking 80s and 90s, and in terms of the tech, and they were kind of limited in what they did. I've always enjoyed MechWarrior Online. I've just kind of stepped away from it for a number of reasons, obviously.
Are all the comics in the BattleTech and MechWarrior universe set in the same timeline in the same universe, or is it because due to different authors and different ideas, they're set in different interpretations?
It's really a pretty cohesive bit of canon. It's one timeline. Different authors will write at different times in different parts of the timeline, filling in low gaps or telling stories we hadn't heard before. But we really work off a cohesive bit of canon that really hasn't morphed or evolved too much until the last 2 years when we brought into the Dark Age era of BattleTech and introduced the Ill Clan era. And that was done with one of the books that I wrote, which was Hour of the Wolf. It was really the first time in years, probably 13 or 14 years, that we had advanced the timeline into a new era for the fans. What's always been a strength of BattleTech in my mind was if you liked the 3025 era, the original era of BattleTech, you can still play it. The rules still apply. There's new rules that you may or may not want to play based on what you're fielding, etc. But the BattleTech core rules, for the most part, have remained the same. There have been additions to those rules as new technologies, etc., new weapon systems were introduced. But fans can really pick what era they like. If they like the clan invasion era, they can go play in that. The novels support that. We have novels that start all the way back prior to this into the Age of War in the Star League era. We have stories that go back that far, all the way through to the Ill Clan era. And so it's really, I think it's one of the neatest parts of the BattleTech universe is that fans can essentially jump in where they want to, play with the tech level that they want to, and there's no ramifications with the rest of the fan base to do that. And I think that's one of the real strengths that BattleTech has always brought to the table.
I know that the Star League, when they were around in the MechWarrior timeline, that their technology was significantly more advanced, and that when their civilization fell, and the inner sphere, the different governments in the inner sphere arose, the technology has been downgraded significantly, and technology was lost. If the Star League were to spontaneously reappear somewhere, say there was a secret army hiding out far away, and they decided to attack the inner sphere, do you think they would win pretty quickly considering their advanced technology?
Not really. The BattleTech, depending on when that emergence would take place, which I'd have to assume is the Ill Clan era, by now, the inner sphere has not only reached the clan level of technology or the Star League level, they've surpassed it. But that also doesn't assume that the Star League would be stagnant, that they might have new technologies that are developed, in the 3 centuries that have passed that would, move them forward too. So it's really hard to say. I don't know if that's a direction that they're going to take the universe in the future. I knew what the roadmap was for the next 3 years, but not the detail that would go down that type of path. I think we're going to be in the Ill Clan era for a while. Let's put it that way.
Before you were canceled, did you have a good experience with Catalyst Game Labs?
That's a good question. I thought I did have a good experience with Catalyst Game Labs. I helped out on numerous projects. When they started their Kickstarter, I could see real quick that they were kind of getting underwater in terms of some of the stuff they were offering. And I immediately contacted Catalyst, said, look, I'm more than willing to help. And I actually wrote the little booklet, the fiction book piece that went in the new box set that came out from the Kickstarter. And I also wrote, they asked me in 2 weeks' time to write a short story that they could release at Gen Con, when the Kickstarter was running, to kind of show that things were moving forward. And I did that. That was called Redemption and Malice. I thought I had a great rapport with them. There were times Lauren Coleman might call me and say, "Hey, I saw a social media post you put up. Would you be willing to pull that down? It might offend X, Y, or Z." I would do that. I did that, I think, on 2 occasions. There was only one time he ever called and asked me to pull down on something on social media where I said absolutely not. For the most part, I thought we were having a good, open dialogue. I have nothing. I'm not going to say anything bad about BattleTech. I do feel that, the way this was handled was not good. There were assurances made to me about, I was going to hear from their lawyer. They were going to reach out to the fan community, let the fans know what was going on, etc. And I told them at the time, I said, just don't throw me under the bus personally. But when they decided to not tell the fans anything, I get bombarded every week with requests for, where's this story? When are you working on now? When's this book going to be out? And all of those things were essentially canceled. And I just felt that it wasn't fair to the fans. And I really didn't feel it was fair to me as well. So, I went public with it, and I have no regrets in doing that at this point.
What do you think the future is for BattleTech? Do you think that this situation has caused a major division in the community? Because I've seen a lot of posts on the internet, and a lot of people in the community appear to be very angry at what happened here. What happened to you?
I don't know what this means for the future of BattleTech. I hope BattleTech goes on and is very successful in the future. I love the universe. I'm a fan, and I think people forget that we as writers are actually fans of the universe ourselves. We enjoy it. We have a special privilege in that we get to create some of those stories that the fans like, but we enjoy BattleTech. I played it. I've had fans to my house and have had them play in my game room with me. So I enjoy BattleTech. BattleTech has seen ups and downs before. I don't think this is going to tear down BattleTech. And a lot of people are upset. I understand that. Believe me, I'm upset, which seems to, it's something that people kind of overlook. But believe me, I'm deeply upset by this. But in the end, will it take down BattleTech? No, I think BattleTech will continue forward. I think BattleTech, like many franchises right now that are in the gaming community, have to come to grips with, are they going to listen to kind of these woke people that want to change the universe or bring their outside politics into the game? Are they going to pander to that? Are they going to listen to that? Are they going to respond to that? Or are they just going to produce good product for the fans, good content, good material, and kind of let things go that way? And I think different companies are going to fall on different sides of that fence. I don't know ultimately where Catalyst is going to fall. I have a suspicion based on how they've handled me, that they're going to react to those things, but I don't know if that's a long-term thing or a short-term thing. It's something they have to come to grips with. But I don't think this is a Catalyst-only problem. This is something that's happened in the Warhammer community. It's happened in a lot of different gaming communities. Gaming has been pulled into this cesspool of wokeism and cancel culture. And I think gaming as a whole needs to wrap its hands around that and respond appropriately. And so far, I haven't seen a lot of that, but I have been very excited because a number of game companies have reached out to me and said, we've had similar problems here. They've expressed support for what I've done because they've experienced the same sort of thing themselves. So it's a problem out there for a lot of different game companies. Will this end BattleTech? I don't believe that at all. I think BattleTech will be played probably 10 years from now, 20 years from now in some shape or form. That's going to happen.
We have a question from KSI Revelations. Favorite clan mechs?
Yeah, I'm always a fan of the Timberwolf because I love the look of the Timberwolf. I like the Savage Wolf look as well. Those are some of my favorites. There's just something about the cool look. The Mad Cat, I think, was one. The Timberwolf, which is the Mad Cat, it captured the essence of the new era when the Clan Invasion era came out, and it visually, it's my favorite mech. It's not my favorite mech to play. So it's always a little bit different. I like the visual image of some of the mechs more than I like, the actual play, how they handle in the game. So I personally like Brent Evans and I, when we did Divided We Fall, which kind of started the whole Ill Clan series of books. We created a mech jointly. Brent did the stats on it, but I did the overall theme on it called the Dominator. And I really like the Dominator because it's all about speed. I mean, it is a fast moving mech. And it's got just enough firepower that if you don't watch it, it can get in behind you real quick and cause some damage. So there's a big difference between the things I like from a visual perspective as an author and as a fan versus the stuff I like to play on the tabletop. So it's not an easy thing to give an answer to.
What's next here? Mike, he says, I will always love BattleTech and some. We've been corrected. Last statement was same.
Good. I think people should love BattleTech. I love BattleTech. I have no issue with BattleTech. I have an issue with how I was treated and how the fans were treated in this.
Of course.
That's people have said, "Oh, he's trying to tear down BattleTech." I've heard all the scandalous little lies that they have propagated against me, and it's not true. I'm not trying to take down BattleTech at all. But I think the fan community needs to know that there's a problem within the fan community, that there are activists who are there with a political agenda that are pushing a narrative, and they will stop at nothing to get their way, and that includes falsifying information, lying, and spreading rumors, and it's incredible to watch that happen, and it's very sad to see that happen in a community. I don't like the concept per se of gatekeeping people out of a community, but I think we almost have to look at people and go, look, if you're going to come into a gaming community and you're going to bring your politics with you, it's going to cause a problem. And I'll give a good example of this, and it has nothing to do with me, but a fan reached out to me, and he was running a local BattleTech game. And it was an intro thing to get people involved in the hobby. He was running at his local game shop. He does this all the time. He had somebody show up and wanted to play. He didn't have enough painted miniatures for everyone, but he gave this person a miniature to play with. It was unpainted, gray miniature, big deal. This person played the game, never complained, never voiced an opinion, but went out and did a 30-minute YouTube on why I was separated out. Clearly, it was because I was transgender. I wasn't given a painted mech. I was treated differently. I was not treated with respect by the guy running the game. This guy's like, this person went on for 30 minutes and they really only played the game for an hour, but they unloaded on that. That's a problem in gaming. That's a thing that's got to be addressed. And I think the fan community is the group to address it and needs to address it up front. The people that come in looking to be offended, the people that come in looking to fulfill some sort of political agenda are a problem within the gaming industry. And this is not just about BattleTech. I guarantee you this person will find something wrong with the next game that they play. And we've got to move past some of this and just get back to rolling the damn dice and having fun.
We have another one here. Templar of Solomon. Thank you. Input on fan community BattleTech content like MechWarrior Living Legends and Wolves.
it's really hard. We have I used to be involved with them until this last few months. We used to have author meetings, and what we do is we don't really factor in the fan input. And the reason is not all the fans can agree on what they want and what the direction should be. So if you ask 100 fans about a faction and what you'd like to see, you're not going to get a cohesive set of directions. And it's not necessarily about providing the fans exactly what they want to see. Sometimes the real solution is to provide the fans with something radically different, to shake them a little bit so that they can look at something from a completely different perspective as a reader and as a player. And so we don't sit around and kind of go, let's do polls and figure out what the fans want to do in this area. We sit down as creative people in a writer's forum and really brainstorm what would be cool to do. What's going to develop the characters? What characters do we want to develop? What characters need to go away, die off, or suffer in some way so as part of their overall growth? So we spend a lot of time from a creative perspective focusing on that type of stuff. I don't think once we ever said, what do the fans want to see? It's more of, from our collective perspectives, what do we think is going to play well with the fan base and what's really going to be engaging for them when they read it. And it might not be the thing they expect. And sometimes that's the real trick in all of this, is to not necessarily just focus on what they're going to expect, but deliver them something really cool instead. So fan input really doesn't factor into this too much.
Another question, Mike, favorite light mech?
Well, I gotta tell you, hands down, I run a Dervish. I love the smaller mechs like that. If you go really light, it's a mech I designed. I like running it. You run it in the right scenario, but I like running the Hussar. It's a Star Leaguer mech. It's all about speed. I have had so much fun with the Hussar. Now the thing's got toilet paper for armor. I mean, if somebody farts at it, it's knocked down. But it has a good kick to it, and it really allows you to get way around behind the enemy. And in BattleTech, facings everything, etc., you can really force an enemy. You can grind their offense right to a halt by running a couple of Hussars to the rear, because they realize, okay, these guys can move in, shoot, and move out, and they're going to be peppering my rear armor, etc. So I've really had good luck running the Hussar, but that's a personal preference of mine, and that's a mech I designed myself too. So that's one I really enjoy.
Did any issues arise in the months or days prior to your removal from Catalyst Games?
None that I'm aware of. Lauren called me once and said that the person that had been harassing me online was stirring the pot again, and that it was an issue with Fanatics, who owns. Fanatics just recently purchased Topps, and Topps was the license holder for BattleTech, so now Fanatics is the owner. And they said Fanatics, was hearing some flack on Twitter. I was actually showed some of the emails that were sent, and all they were people going, how can you have an author like Blaine Pardoe working for you? And they did at Topps, at Fanatics, etc., and the tweets. And that really was the impetus for what started all of this. Lauren and I talked in late February about it. And then I got a call in March going, basically, well, this is what's come down. Fanatics has told me to make this go away. Those were his words. And my decision is we're no longer going to do fiction from you going forward. They agreed to pay me for the outstanding work that I had both in process and that was completed. I had a couple of stories that were literally done and ready to go out the door. Editing had already gone through them. Art was done for them. etc. All of that stuff got completely shelved and set aside. And that, I was basically told, we're not going to be using you going forward. I questioned this. I said, how do you know this isn't just a handful of people? Because what he was showing me was 5 or 6 people complaining. And I said, how do you know this isn't just 5 or 6 people with a handful of sock accounts generating this noise? And he said, I don't know, and it doesn't matter. I offered to write under a pseudonym. I said, look, I want the stories to get out there. The fans want the stories out there. So I'll create a whole pseudonym with no social media presence whatsoever, and you can publish my stuff under that. And he said, nope, that's not workable. So to me, it just seemed like there was no due process in this. There was no, let's talk through this. Lauren said, I looked at some of your social media posts. I found them offensive. I showed them out of context to several people, and they found them offensive. And I said, you can't do that. Context is everything. So you can't just take a quote or a partial quote or anything out of context and post it up. You need to show the whole dialogue that took place before that so that you understand what that is. And he said, well, no, this is how the internet works. It was frustrating for me. It was frustrating, I'm sure, for the fans. But I thought we had a good dialogue. I thought I knew these people and could trust them. And clearly I had misplaced my loyalty. And I feel bad about that. There's a part of me that feels a little, ignorant in terms of the realities of this, but I wouldn't have changed anything on my side of this. This was a decision on their part. And it's a bit, I even told Lauren, it's a business decision. I respect you're making a business decision. I was very professional on the phone with him. It doesn't mean it didn't hurt. It didn't mean it wasn't a bitter thing that I had to deal with. And I really didn't like the fact that, following all of this, even my former editor, who I'd had no communication with, by the way, zero, since I had been let go, fired me off an email going, when he saw that my new book and from a different publisher was coming out, and he said, I don't want this drivel associated with BattleTech. And I was like, drivel, I bailed this guy out on numerous occasions. I thought we had a good working relationship, but now he's basically a book that's not even in print yet. He's calling drivel. And I really resented that. And that was a big tipping point for me because it told me something about the culture within that organization that I hadn't really fully understood and appreciated. That email was directly sent to myself and to the president of Catalyst. And until a couple of days ago, he hadn't, no one had said anything about it. I did get a call from President Catalyst, and he did apologize for that, for the company, but that's all he apologized for. And I think it's a good start. And I did pick up the phone. There was a lot of debate about whether I'd pick up that phone call, but I did. So, it's a good start. Whether they can mend this fence or not, honestly, that's on them. It's not on me. I know exactly where I stand, and I stand by my values, and I stand by my beliefs, and hopefully they will find a path out of this for themselves and for all of us involved.
Got a couple of more questions here.
Sure.
Mike again. What's your opinion on Mech Assault?
I really haven't played it. I wish I could give you an opinion on it. I just haven't played Mech Assault. Not in a meaningful way.
So the next one, KSI Revelations. How do you feel about the future of the BattleTech community? Future books, games, and popularity?
Well, I think BattleTech has been experiencing a huge resurgence. With the Kickstarter, a whole new group of fans was brought into the BattleTech community. We've seen a resurgence in the fiction. I think BattleTech is more popular now than it has been since the FASA days. You got to look at it in terms of where things are relatively. I mean, BattleTech at its prime, when they would put out a source book or a scenario pack, I mean, they would print 12, 13,000 of these things and sell them out without a problem. that dynamic, we will never be back to that level again of stuff. I don't think, where we're just constantly doing that. But I think BattleTech's popularity has resurged. It certainly has helped that they have redone the mechs, done them proportionally, and done them in plastic. I think plastic is a great way to play. I know there's guys out there that are metalheads. They love the Ironwind metal stuff. And I have a whole bunch of Ironwind metals mechs myself. But the new mech designs that have come out of Catalyst, I think, are great. And I think they're going to be what kind of propels that the future growth of this is, getting those out to the fan community and really driving it that way. I think that's going to be the key to all of this. I think BattleTech will prevail and continue on. I think some fans are going to be upset about this. I haven't pushed for a boycott. I'm not telling people don't spend your money with Catalyst. I'm a fan of Catalyst, man. It bothered me a little bit that, because the Leviathans Kickstarter's out there. I've written some stuff for Leviathans. I was really looking forward to being part of that Kickstarter. And all weekend, I kept going to the Kickstarter going, do I want to buy this anyway? And I personally just can't give money to Catalyst at this point. I may feel differently sometime down the road, but I can't. I just can't do that, but that's my choice. And I think all the fans have to kind of reach their own decision as to where they spend their money and how they spend their money. The economy is getting tighter, so fans are going to start looking at other reasons to not spend money in certain areas or reasons to spend money in other areas. So I'm not pushing for any sort of harm to come to BattleTech out of this. I think BattleTech will continue to grow. Despite the uproar, despite the angst and agina this has caused, I think BattleTech will prevail and continue on long after I'm dead in the ground.
Look at the next one. Emperor Solomon, who now goes by Nightly Doggo, we got to get this man to play Mech Assault 1 and 2, laughing out loud.
Right now, I'm not in the mood to play BattleTech stuff, guys. I just need a break from this. Sorry, Nightly Doggo.
What do you think of the Jihad and Dark Age eras?
I think the Jihad, well, you got to look at the history of this. So I hate the Jihad. I think the Jihad was it was a hot mess. But the Jihad really came about because there was an 80-year hop in the timeline. So we were in, the FedCom Civil War. We set up everything for the Word of Blake Jihad. And then the license went over to WizKids, and WizKids put out the Click Age Dark Age. And when they did that, they referenced the Jihad that had taken place prior to all of this. Well, the Dark Ages was a hot mess all on its own. The editor over there, who's now, I think, the editor of the Star Wars novel line, didn't want to use any of the established authors other than to kick this off. They used Mike Stackpole, but then they basically told all of us authors to go pound sand. They were going to bring in, and I'm using their words, professional writers who could tell better stories than we did in BattleTech. And the first, I'd say, 2 or 3 years of the MechWarrior Dark Age novels, they floundered. It was clear that these were people that didn't really understand the canon, didn't understand the history, didn't understand the background. Dark Ages finally decided after a while to start reaching out to the existing authors and pulling us back in. And it really started to pick up momentum. And then, WizKids kind of folded in terms of doing the Dark Ages stuff. In the meantime, the classic BattleTech people, the only era for them to go into, when you think about it, was to backfill this hot, steamy mess that they called the Jihad. It was, there was some good fiction that came out of it, but it was all source book based. And a lot of that was the BattleTech writers and Shadowrun writers at that era were not getting paid royalties. We were owed royalties for like upwards of 11 years. It's a whole different story. I won't go into it right now, but so, there were no novels coming out to support the Jihad. So everything was being done in source book. And when you do that, you don't get good stories. What you get are headline bullets, and they killed off all the major mercenary units, which was dumb. There were parts of this that have never fully, in my opinion, been fully explained in a way that a BattleTech fan wants to know. How did the Word of Blake, which was the splinter group of Comstar, end up with a vast array of ships that were technologically more advanced than anything else in the Inner Sphere? They had new technology that no one else had seen, and they raised armies that could attack all of the Inner Sphere houses and actually devastate them deeply during this jihad era. No matter what you do, you got to explain that whole MacGuffin that's been thrown out there. And I don't think they ever did an adequate job of that. They got so caught up in nuts and bolts details of where certain regiments were at certain times and on what planets that they lost sight of the fact that fiction is what should drive the BattleTech universe. And it's something that Brent Evans really came back to with the Ill Clan era. When he took over as line developer, he said, we got to get back to where fiction's driving the universe, not source books. During the whole Jihad era, and I think it was 13 or years that Catalyst was writing, literally caught in that quagmire of the Jihad. In that whole time, what was driving it were these big, bulky source books, and it wasn't telling good stories. There was fiction in there, but they were fiction snippets. They weren't really good stories about great characters. And that's what BattleTech's always been about. We had great characters that we put in interesting situations, and they grew, they evolved, they did things. And it took the fans along for the ride. And I was so glad when Brent Evans took over, and realized one of the first things he told me, he said, I want to make fiction the driver again in BattleTech. And I'm like, finally somebody gets it. Because that's what made BattleTech a success, I think, in the early years. It's definitely, I think, what's driving it into the Ill Clan era.
Mike again. He says, what's your opinion on Harmony Gold trying to sue BattleTech?
My opinion on it didn't matter. I thought it was dumb. This should have been able to be settled out of court. It shouldn't have had to go into the quagmire that it did. And I was on the inside. We weren't really in the loop with all of the legal dealings. It wasn't until the last few years that I actually started doing some digging on my own to kind of find out what was going on. It was stupid. And honestly, I think Harmony Gold would have been smarter. And they damaged their own brand by waging war against BattleTech. This wasn't a deliberate theft situation. This was clearly a mistake as to who owned the rights to what, who had licensed it to whom. And there was some double dipping that was taking place. I think that they did more damage to their own brand fighting it than they did just trying to resolve it. And I think that's a problem with a lot of companies in the gaming industry, is they're willing to dig their heels in and fight. Be it with the fan community, be it with guys who own 3D printers, be it whatever. And rather than embrace some of those groups and say, look, let's work together and come up with something that works.
Let's take a look at the next one. Daniel Kaniraman, I hope I pronounced your last name right. Would you be willing to participate in a fan-created alternative BattleTech timeline?
Right now, I need a break from this. And, I don't think anybody understands, unless you've actually been in my situation, Daniel, how much I had emotionally invested in BattleTech and what it actually meant to me. It doesn't have appeal to me at this point in time. Now, I can't say in 6 to 10 months I might feel very differently about that. For right now, I don't want to kind of contribute. Someone asked me the other day, they said, well, your stories that aren't going to be published, are you going to put them up, as fan fiction on your blog? And I'm like, those are, no, I'm not going to do that either. I don't want to get caught up in any more than what I already have in terms of this. And so no, right now that's not something that appeals to me. That may change over time. You never know.
Next one, Rob Cowboy. He says, just came from the Razor Fist video. Happy to hear more from you.
Well, thank you, Rob. I do appreciate it. You know, I think this is just a story that the gaming industry needs to wrap their heads around. We've seen a lot of weird stuff in the last few years in gaming. And gaming should be for everyone. I've said this all along that gaming is. I've always felt gaming is the most open and engaging hobby that's out there. I've never seen anybody turned away from a table because of their race, their sexual preference. If they showed up in a furry costume, nobody cares. If you're there to game, sit down and let's throw some dice. Um, I get this feeling that there are people now that believe that the solution is that they should be buying product based on the politics of who writes what, etc. And it's just not healthy for the game. Why don't you just enjoy the games for what they are and enjoy each other, in playing the games. To me, gaming is very social. And there's a lot of people that are engaged in gaming that this is their entire social outreach, is the Saturday when they go to the game store, sit down with their friends and buddies and a handful of strangers and sling some dice. And I think we've gotten away from that, and people are trying to kind of interject their personal politics into it and make it a nasty place. And my whole thing is, why can't we just have gaming be gaming? And I've been playing since 1972, 73. I have the original white box set of Dungeons and Dragons, which is what I started on. I run games in my house. I have fun. To me, that's what gaming's about. And I'm hoping we can all get back to some semblance of that as we move forward.
Mike says, I agree. That was that was an answer to your that was in response to your answer to his question about Harmony Gold.
Okay.
He has another one here. He says, favorite clan?
Wolverine. I always like the underdogs. I'm a sucker for stories of last stands or groups that are faced with impossible odds and may prevail or fail, but do so gloriously. And favorite clan would definitely be Wolverine. If you're asking me to choose amongst the existing clans that are in the Ill Clan era, I'm going to go with Smoke Jaguar. They have a lot to prove. They're back in the Ill Clan era, and I think that story, which I was doing the novel for at the time, I think it's great. I think there was some really great opportunity to see a clan that had always kind of been portrayed as the space Nazis or the villains of this. They committed war crimes. I know fans got all upset about that, but it was like every faction in BattleTech has at one point or another committed some war crime. But bringing the Jaguars back and having them find their identity in this universe of constant war, in a new era, where everything has changed, I think that was going to be just a stellar story. And I'm sorry that it'll never come out, or to the, that it's dead as a result of all of this. But I think it would have been fun for the fans, and I think they would have enjoyed it.
We got a couple of more questions here. Cobalt Gaming, the stuff that y'all have made is awesome. My dad introduced me to BattleTech with MechAssault when I was a kid. I love it. Love the work. God bless you guys. Your passions are awesome.
Thank you. It's Cobalt Gaming. I appreciate that. Like I said, we're all fans of the universe. As we're not just guys who crank out words and spit out stories. We're fans of the universe. So when we write it, we almost look at this stuff. How are the fans going to react to it? Because we're fans too. So that means a lot.
Rob Cowboy again. It's sad that companies are more inclined to listen to who is just making noise rather than who has the better argument. Never treat your staff like they are replaceable.
Well, Rob, I would say that is true of beyond the gaming industry. I think we've got to start taking a look at our companies that are out there that are bowing to these loud voices as well. I think it's not a gaming issue. It almost goes broader in some respects. I think we've got to get past the point where we just react to the loudest voice in the room, because being loud doesn't mean you're right. It just means you're the loudest one. And that's not a good way to kind of govern or lead.
Do you think that the main reason that you were let go is because of your politics and not necessarily just because of that guy that was harassing you?
I gave this a lot of thought during the initial phase of this exile, and I even raised this with Lauren. I said, "Look, you have a lot of authors and artists who post stuff on the internet that I find offensive as a conservative. Um, some of their views are quite radical, actually, and I have kept a big library of screenshots of other authors and artists within BattleTech at the advice of my legal counsel to do so. And I said, these guys are posting stuff that's infuriating, but nobody's complaining about that. And, his whole vibe was, well, I'm going to have a talking to with a couple of them, but you're the one I'm going to let go. Now, my impression of that is you don't like my politics. And so you don't like my politics. So you're letting me go, but they're getting a talking to. Now, if this had been a unilateral thing where it was like, look, the following 5 or 6 authors we're not going to do business with them because we find their political views to be extreme in some way, this might have been more palatable for me. But when I'm the only one targeted and I'm the only one impacted, I have to believe that it's because of my views, because you're not doing this to people who have views that are counter to mine, that I find just as insulting. Now, the difference was nobody was complaining about these people. And I'm not going to out them right now. Some of them have continued to pile on with this. They've been rejoicing and at my departure, et cetera. And I'm like, you guys really need to be careful. I've been very charitable up to this point. But, if you continue to, stab additional knives in my back, there's a lot that you've put up in your social media in the last 2 years that if conservatives were to see it and portrayed the way you've portrayed comments I've done with nasty little labels and taken out of context, frankly, you've got a lot of explaining to do yourself, and you may find yourself the targets of conservatives. I don't want to start a right versus left war here, so I'm trying to be nice about this, but I got to be honest with you, it's getting harder each day. So yeah, I do believe my politics were definitely part of this, and it's censorship at the source. You're saying, I don't want this creator here because his conservative ideals, he voices them, he makes them public, it creates a little angst with some of my viewers. So I'm going to do away with him, but I'm going to allow the people at the other end of the spectrum to do whatever the hell they want. So there's no way that I think a sane person can look at this and say it's not political in some way.
Let's take a look at the next one here. Rob Cowboy again. What is some ideas, stories that you wanted to do with any house, clan, state, regardless of effects?
We've had this discussion for a long time within BattleTech. The map has not dramatically changed ultimately. When you come down to it, you still have the 5 houses, etc. We at one point merged, into the Federated Commonwealth, the Lyran Commonwealth into the Federated Sons, and then we tore that apart and went back to kind of the antebellum period of what the map looked by. I would very much be a proponent for maybe one of the big houses needs to fall. And I mean fall, not fall, and then we're going to bring them back in 6 months or a year or 2 years. I mean fall. And I think that would be more realistic. But, we're talking realistic within the BattleTech universe is always kind of a fudgy thing anyway. I've often said BattleTech is beer and pretzel science fiction. It's not hard science fiction. It's fun science fiction. And maybe that would be too radical, but I would like to see a state knocked down hard. And I mean really hard. If not completely, absorbed or taken out. And we've been close. We flirt with it. But there's always that fear that, well, what about the fans that are out there that really love this state? They're going to be upset. But, people like, sometimes you need a good gut punch. I think we all saw The Empire Strikes Back. We all saw Avengers Infinity War. And the biggest emotional reaction you can get sometimes is when your side loses. And it has an emotional impact on you, and it does fire you up. So let's see. I don't know. That's my take on it. I hope that answers it for you, Rob.
Look at the next one. Mike again. He says, what gave you the idea of BattleTech?
Well, I got the early man. I didn't create BattleTech at all. I'm just a contributor to it. I'm not overstating what my contributions are. I've written 20 novels and novellas that have been published in BattleTech. I've written 25 plus source books, countless articles over the years in support of it. I didn't come up with the idea of BattleTech. That was the genius work, of Jordan Weisman and Ross Babcock. They did a great job with it. They laid good foundational blocks that we have built on since the 1980s. And I still think the fact that we're still talking about BattleTech when so many gaming systems have died since the 1980s, I think attests to how well their concepts have stood the test of time.
Here's my final question. Do you think that if they decide to incorporate leftist views into MechWarrior or BattleTech or whatever, in other words, make it woke, do you think that would cause serious issues?
I think it would alienate a group of fans, hands down. I think that there'll be a group of fans that will feel that they're not represented in the game community. And you're really turning at that point your entire publishing process and your editing process over to a mob and saying, so before we print this, what do you think? How are you going to react to it? I think that will cause more damage, more harm, more devastation than anything else that you could do to the franchise. And I think what I've seen in the last few days is a lot of the fan base, and it's split down the middle, I guarantee you, somewhere just like the rest of the country, just like the rest of the world. But half of the community is not in favor of that stuff, and half of the community is. You can't pander to one side or the other. If you pander to one side or the other, if you want to play the game of virtue signaling stuff, you are going to really piss off fans. Take a look at Disney, for God's sake. Their stock has plummeted since they decided they were going to get into the woke business, that they were going to groom the fan base, that they were stepping away from their core ideals of producing good family content and shifting to, we're going to push political agendas. And once they did that, their stock tanked, and it is still down. And that's what the reaction's going to be. Conservatives tend not to scream and holler and try to get people fired. What conservatives do is talk with their credit cards and wallets. And if you go down that path, I think it would be devastating to BattleTech long term. I think you'd be isolated. You'd be telling half of the fan community, your voice doesn't count. We don't want to hear from you. We're going to listen only to this other subsect, and that's what we're going to base our decisions on, and that's how we're going to base our actions on. You do that, it's going to be a bad time for everyone. That's my take on it. I don't know if that's accurate. I think each fan has to kind of decide for themselves how they feel about that.
Well, thanks for joining me today.
I appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. And I thank everybody participating in the live chat, and I thank all of you for your questions.
All right. Thank you very much, Jacob. I do appreciate it.
Of course. I thank you for coming on.